Hey folks, this is the Fighting Nerd, Ray Chalensky, and his co-host, Jolly Roger, coming to you from the Resistance Bunker. Let Star Wars die with dignity. Now might become part of a collection of videos with me. This is one of my earliest videos, Dignity. And unless Aquaman really hits it out of the park, it might be let the DC Universe on screen die with dignity. But Star Wars. Solo, a Star Wars story, tanked at the box office. Now, by the standards of almost any other movie or movie franchise, it did okay. I can't remember the exact amount, but it really underperformed for a Star Wars movie. Now, there are a lot of reasons for this, and there was Infinity War, which is still number 4 or 5 at the box office even after all its release, which by most, well, what I've heard is a great movie. One of my brothers, who is not a comic book guy, he's not even a sci-fi guy, hasn't even seen the rest of the Marvel franchise movies, really loved it, raving about it. And then there was Deadpool as well. But I think one of the reasons that nobody wants to admit that this movie tanked was because it was preceded in the franchise by The Last Jedi, which I did a video on. I will link it in the notes to this video. But that video was entitled The Last Jedi, Mind-Numbingly Stupid. Okay, and after that, I decided that after that movie was so horrible, I decided that I wasn't even going to bother with Solo, and I'm not. Because you knew it was going to be essentially Star Wars in name only and leftist propaganda. And there was kind of quite a controversy over Lando Calrissian, the younger Lando Calrissian, having kind of a twisted relationship, if you want to call it that, with a droid. And one of the directors or producers said that Lando is actually polysexual. Okay, whatever pulls his trigger, except that there was no indication of that in the other Star Wars movies. The Billy D. Williams version of the character seemed quite taken with Princess Leia, and didn't seem to have a sex robot or a sex droid in his possession. And another thing, why would you do that anyway? No matter what your own sexual or preference or gender identity is, what did it do to further the story? Answer: nothing. And when your purpose is to tell an entertaining story, why would you put something in the story that doesn't matter? Now, as a writer, you have a tendency to do this. I'm an author. I have some books published. And I have a good editor. And my editor, when I put extraneous stuff in there that I think is really cool, that I want people to know about my characters, he says, okay, Ray, that's cool. And maybe it's not badly written, but it has nothing to do with the story. Cut it. And probably 9 times out of 10, I listen to him, or I make at least I take a big chunk of those sections out. It doesn't matter that he's a polysexual, and it doesn't matter that he's banging a droid in the story. But the thing is this: what we have here is a bunch of people who are Maoist that are in control of the story. They may not realize they're Maoist, at least neo-Maoist. But the thing of it is, that motto is politicize everything. That left-wing agenda has to be hammered in everything. Propaganda has to be everywhere. And that's why we get polysexuals in Star Wars. And that's why we get this social justice warrior political correctness thing in all media. It just permeates everything. That's so, and nobody wants to go to a movie to be beaten over the head with any political agenda. Now, is it okay to put social commentary in entertainment? Yes, I try to do it in my work. But there is a difference between social commentary and social engineering. What they're attempting to do in Star Wars and the new Star Treks, if you want to call Discovery and the Abrams versus Star Trek, I call them in Star Trek in name only. They're not doing social commentary. They are telling you that if you don't think this way, that if you don't think it's okay to have some sort of twisted relationship with a mechanical device, or if you may think that homosexuality is a lifestyle that's not necessarily for you, and you may not want to, you may not want to lean that way. Or if you don't think it's okay for a man to use a woman's restroom because he decides he's a woman, or vice versa. But these movies are saying if you don't think that way, you're stupid, you're ignorant, and you're backward. So they want to beat you like that. Now the fact of the matter is there are a great many people out there that don't buy into that. They go into nice conventional morality. And they realize that there are differences between the sexes, and there are only two sexes when it comes to humans. And they're not going to plunk down, what is it, $15, $20 for a movie ticket now? They're not going to plunk that money down and then spend all of that money for overpriced beverages at the theaters to be talked down to and belittled. Next reason that Solo tanked. Is that you have the last, you have the Last Jedi fatigue. They turned Luke Skywalker into a whiny, self-loathing person that never really wanted to take responsibility for his actions, and everybody was afraid of what they were going to do to the Han Solo character. What are they going to do to him? Because, folks, when you have these franchises like Star Wars, like Star Trek, like Justice League, and all the individual characters franchises, these characters have become like friends to people. You know these characters, or at least you thought you did. Han Solo. Roguish, maybe not the nicest fellow in the world. Push comes to shove, does the right thing, and complains about it the whole way. Not a bad guy. Just wants to kind of do his thing and be left alone. But when confronted with right and wrong, he chooses right. Leia, going to do the right thing. And knows she's going to do the right thing. Right? And she's going to insist that others around her help her do the right thing. Committed to the cause. Luke. Again, always going to do the right thing. A little bit naive at first. But never lose, and even as he grows into a Jedi Master, in the real Star Wars movies, doesn't lose that sense of right and wrong that he wound up with at the farm. All of these characters were predictable. And that's what made the franchise endure. And it's the same with Star Trek. The primary crew of Star Trek were friends, right? You didn't invite them into your living room once a week. They more or less invited you into their bridge. And even in Next Generation, which I think is the weakest of the actual Star Trek, but it is real Star Trek. The Abrams first, as I said, Abrams Discovery aren't Star Trek. That's a whole other video. But Picard was predictable. You knew what he was going to do. You knew what Kirk was like. But now in the latest Star Wars bunch of directors, they were saying, well, we're going to subvert what people expect from Star Wars. Why? Hardcore Star Wars people ran from the franchise in droves after the disaster that was Last Jedi. But again, it comes back, is that for them, it's about politics. It's about the social justice warfare. They're not even talking, they don't even care about their bottom line anymore. Because if they did, they wouldn't go out of their way to alienate the people that have been giving them money for these stories for 30 years. Excuse me. That little belch came out of nowhere. And I suck at editing, so I don't edit. At least not very much. Anyway. 30 plus years of Star Wars now. And it was successful because it did have predictable characters. It did have a somewhat formulaic plot. And that was one of the keys to its success. It was a rich world where it had strange rules, but for the most part, the Star Wars rules in the first movie were the Star Wars rules in the second movie and the third movie. And then we started getting kind of iffy with the prequels. But there was a consistency there. And now, he came along with Return of the Jedi, which was only a success because we had to wait so long between Star Wars movies. And then The Last Jedi, which, as mentioned before, was a disaster because they basically said, okay, we've had this rabid, dedicated fan base forever. But you know what? We're going to change everything that they liked about it. Liked about Star Wars. Because we're smarter and more enlightened and want to teach them how to be enlightened like us. And that's exactly what they did. Those stories just completely took everything that would made those characters precious and stripped them away. And then they wonder why Solo doesn't make any money. Because even people with a passing interest in Star Wars that saw the movies, never read any of the books, never went into deep, nerdy Star Wars lore, knew they had screwed up. Knew they would screw this up, and that Solo would be a continuation of the screw-ups. And unless they get rid of the people that are responsible for this, the Kennedy woman that's in charge of Lucasfilm just has to go. And I'm not saying that they have to take Star Wars in a politically to the right. The thing about Star Wars is the first three movies, they were fantastically apolitical. Empire bad, Rebels good, right? Good guy, Empire, tyranny, Rebels, freedom, Rebels fighting full tilt boogie woogie for freedom and justice. It wasn't left or right. It didn't have to be. But what we have in Hollywood today is a whole bunch of people that are all about social justice warfare and want to take the rank and file working Americans and socially engineer them to be good neo-Maoists like they are. You can make a film that has social commentary in it. Again, social commentary and social justice is a whole different thing. Social commentary. This is a problem we have in this society. Is you can work that into a story. And yes, the characters have to deal with that, right? And if you do it right, one character has this opinion, one character has that opinion. They still work together they could still work together. Or if it's a villain that has that opinion and he has to be defeated, he has to be defeated. But you defeat the villain, you don't necessarily have to defeat his entire point of view, just maybe his execution of it. Robert Heinlein was a master of putting social commentary into everything. And he did. His book has social commentary. But he's not advocating a particular point of view. He's just trying to get people to think about these issues. And that's where the social justice warriors that are in charge of media today, particularly in sci-fi, is no. If you don't think this way, if you don't think our way, you're wrong. If you don't think a world government, for instance, would be a fabulous idea and we would all get along like the Care Bears if they lived next to the Smurfs. No. You can say, well, there would be some, okay, you have a world government and there could be some benefits to that. Pooling of resources, for instance. But ask the question, will it be a forced pooling of resources? Right? If, for instance, the Afghanis don't want to give up all that lithium that they have in their ground, right? But the rest of the world needs it, is it all right for the rest of the world to send military forces in to take it? You ask that question. Maybe have some of the ifs, ands, or buts argued in your story, and then go on and then tell the story with that backdrop. You don't have to say, which is that the Afghans who own the land that precious metal is on, that rare earth mineral is in, are bad because they don't want to share it with the world. Right? And you don't necessarily have to say that because the world absolutely has to have this stuff, it's all right for them to take it. You ask those questions. You let the characters have social commentary. But what we're getting is if you don't think it's okay for a character to be attracted to small children, which, if it keeps going the way it's going, with the morality or lack of their morality expressed in a lot of sci-fi today, or expressed in media today, it's coming to that. Give me 20 years. Tell me truthfully, in 20 years, did you ever think that people would be saying, hey, if I identify as a man, I can walk into a woman's restroom? Did any of you older folks out there ever think that would ever happen? And now you're probably telling us, well, they'll never legitimize pedophilia. It'll never happen. How much do you want to bet? Because the social engineering is happening, right? There'll be a movie or there'll be a show where there'll be a pedophile who gets imprisoned or something like this. I predict this. This is going to happen. And they're going to do one from the pedophile's point of view. And they're going to make that story very sympathetic. And it'll go to one of the film festivals like Cannes or something like that. And all the liberal pseudo-intellectuals will say, well, now, that point of view had to have been told. Yeah, I mean, pedophilia is bad, but now you can kind of see it from his point of view. Right? He doesn't think he's evil. And then there'll be one that's a little bit more sympathetic, and a little bit more sympathetic, and a little bit more sympathetic. 20, 30, 40 years from now, they're going to be at least talking about making it legal. But for right now, even a lot of far left people who watch Star Wars don't buy this stuff. Or if they are okay with, sex robots or being polyamorous or whatever you want, even if they are okay with that, they're scratching their head. Why the hell did they put that in a Star Wars movie? I don't come in to see Star Wars for this. I come there to be entertained, not programmed. And that's why this movie tanked. And if they keep making like this way, the next one's going to tank. And the next one after that's going to tank. So that's why I say, let Star Wars die with dignity. Because it's going to die. You cannot just take the things that make Star Wars great, and one of the things that everybody said that they loved about Star Wars, it was simple. You could forget all the complications of the day. You could forget that Bilderberg's going on in Turin, Italy right now. You could forget that there's a big NATO conference going on. You can forget that the fate of the Korean Peninsula and the entire Pacific area around the South China Sea and the Sea of Japan is being decided right now in Singapore. You can forget that Venezuela, after years of oppressive socialism, is falling apart in the country. And you don't have to think about those poor people in Venezuela. Excuse me, not Venezuela. In Guatemala and Hawaii that are whose lives are being destroyed by volcanoes. You could go in to one of the old Star Wars movies or put it in your DVD player or your Blu-ray player or whatever and sit down and watch Luke, Leia, Han, and Chewie defeat the Empire despite overwhelming odds and destroy the Death Star. A wonderful hour and a half, 2 hours of simplicity. But the Hollywood pseudo-intellectuals won't let you do that. Now, if you want a movie to go get you to make you think, you can go. You can put in JFK. Now, I don't particularly care for that movie, but it does present some interesting ideas about the Kennedy assassination. But the thing of it is, when you went to see that movie, you knew what you were getting. You weren't. This wasn't going to be fluff. But sometimes you go to see fluff. You go to see The Incredibles 2. You go to see The Incredibles 1. Right? And that's why everybody is jonesing after all this time about Incredibles 2. And that's why they wanted to see The Empire Strikes Back. They wanted to see the Return of the Jedi. You get a little, you did a little thing about the nature of power and the dark and the light and dark side of human nature. That was engaging. You had some nice action sequence. You had the cute little Ewoks on Return of the Jedi. And you came out and you were feeling pretty good. When you get out of Solo, why did they have to put polyamorism in a movie? Why was it there? And it takes you completely out of the narrative. So you have to conclude that they don't care about making money, and they really don't care about how many people see it, as long as the other people, the people that do see it, are exposed to their ideology in what they consider to be a positive way. And it's going to kill Star Wars. It'll die a painful, lingering death. So I say just stop. Stop now, while there are people who are alive who remember Star Wars when it was good. And before you create an entire generation, which you really already have, you've already created an entire generation that only knows Star Wars from the prequels. That's sad. It saddens me. I've always been a more Star Trek guy than a Star Wars guy, but I remember, and I've told this story before, little Ray Chlinsky, 9 years old, staying up late on a Saturday night watching The Time Machine, because 9-year-old Ray was already a sci-fi nerd, watching Rod Taylor on the Rod Taylor version of the Time Machine, and seeing the first commercial for Star Wars, and had a fit of joy that literally woke up everybody in the house. At that time, this was a time when we had 3 channels on a UHF, 3 channels on the TV, and a UHF antenna on top of the house. And it was a 20-mile drive to a theater to see this. I made my mother and my brothers, whoever I could get, take me to see that movie 3 times in the theater. That was a big deal back then. The first time I was in the back seat, flying my in the back seat of the car on the way home, flying my X-wing, recreating the attack on the Death Star. You are not going to get that with Star Wars, the Star Wars franchise as it is now. It's almost not safe to take a young child to see one of these movies. And I don't see that there's going to be a franchise that comes along, or another movie comes along, that's ever going to generate that kind of excitement again. Because movies and entertainment in general have become a blatant propaganda arm for the left. And there are some doing it for the right too. Not as many, and certainly not with as much influence. The fact is there. So let Star Wars die with dignity. Please don't torture death or distort it into something unrecognizable as Star Wars. So, on that cheery note, I bid you remember that words make history. I'll get that finger in that frame here. Words make history. This is Ray Chemlinsky, the Fighting Nerd, his co-host Jolly Roger, bidding you good night from the Resistance Bunker.